Thank you, everybody. This is the last little bit of the day together, and I've been asked to do a few closing remarks, a few thoughts about next steps, but you still have some work to do, so watch out for the moment for that. I'm the Director of Libraries and Museums at the University of St Andrews, and I've had the huge privilege for the last few years to be part of this journey together, this TANK programme, through the steering group. And the others in the steering group are here will know it's been just incredible conversations that we've had at the meetings. And the same today, there's been some really thought-provoking preservations. Digital preservation's got me. Some presentations, challenges, things for us to work together on and to think differently about. And Roly Keating, if you wind back to the beginning of the day, he opened by asking us to remember the overarching mission of TANK, to unlock the potential of our national collections. And that does need unlocking. I recently ran an AHRC-funded project that looked at teaching online with digitised collections during the pandemic and discovered that, slightly to our surprise, most academics used material from their own universities in doing that. There were good reasons for that, but the great promise of being able to go and pick anything from anywhere didn't manifest when they were up against it and looking to find collections to teach with. So breaking down the barriers is hugely important. Making sure we can connect up our collections is important, but it won't be enough on its own. We can't just open the doors and expect people to want to walk in. We have to work on how to invite people in, how to collaborate, how to co-create the future national digital collection so that it's vital and relevant to the future audiences that we're going to be working for. So I've picked out three main themes from today, which are sort of what's in my head. You'll probably have other themes, so I'm just sort of throwing out some initial thoughts, and I hope the conversation continues. One of those is about the digital and the physical and the relationship between them. There was various speakers who talked about the need to go beyond the replication of physical things in digital spaces, but instead to maximize the potential of digital tools and technologies to complement and extend what we have in our physical collections, and for the right connections to make that a really strong and mutually reinforcing relationship. I was really struck by the example of the anatomy of an AI, that even something like an AI system involves people and resource and place and has all sorts underneath it that gets more and more complicated when you look at it in its context and in the round. And I also thought it was fascinating to think about undersea North Sea landscapes and the way that you've got prehistory and future infrastructure kind of colliding, and you can use some of the processes and approaches that are being experimented with in the TANK programme to think about those and to think about how collections can help us think about those. There was a big theme today about inclusion, not just in the session about inclusion, but throughout. Various speakers talked about how to responsibly reflect and include the perspectives of people who've maybe been excluded or marginalised. Other people talked about how to approach gaps in our collections and how we think about those and tackle them. But we were challenged as well, because unless, and this was a point in the inclusion session, unless we're actually quite radical in our rethinking of fundamental processes, then we won't really bring in the views of people with lived experience who have different perspectives on our collections. We really need to think about how we structure the future of our sector and the work we do together. And speaking of the work we do together, that was sort of my third theme, was about ways of working together. The examples today have shown the potential of bringing together collections and data across forms, across formats, across collections, and we've brought some of that out in the questions as well. The Digital Benin project was a really amazing example of that, the Sloan collections too, and others as well, within TANK and beyond. There's also been projects looking at how to move beyond the model of collections coming into our institutions, so post-custodial approaches to the national collection, and thoughts about how to empower people and enable people to preserve their own collections, but connect that into the research, the teaching, the learning, the engagement that we want to do with the future digital national collection. And the third element I wanted to highlight there as well under the way we work together is this notion of care. We've often thought about care of collections, care of people, but care of relationships came out, the care with which we do our work being vital to our success. So as I said, I'm sure you've got a whole load of other ideas in your mind and settling out. And I would definitely encourage you to stay in touch with interesting people you've met today to build that conversation and move it forward. To help the Tank team work out what's next, though, we have a few questions for you, and this is where you have to do a little bit more work. Tank has embraced and supported research towards an evidence base to really shape the bid for what's next, because we are going to have to try and put a case together for what's next. But we want all of you to help. So this is where the QR code on the back of your delegate badge comes in. It's also up on the screen here. So get clicking before I move on to the next slide. I'm just watching for the phones to go down. This is the physical and the digital in action. All right, can we have the first question, please? This first question, when it comes up, is really thinking about this point about investment. We always knew that as extraordinary as the initial investment was, it was only the start. We've heard our speakers today talk about what they would prioritize, and we've heard from some of the funders in our sector talking about how they can support us and what they're thinking about. So what would you prioritize? And you'll see the picture, the screen will come up with live results. For those of you who are thinking, the option I want isn't on this screen, don't panic. There are 3 questions, and the third one is for you. So hold any thoughts you have that can't be entered at this point. All right, I think we'll move on in the interests of finishing mostly on time. So the next question then is about infrastructure, and various of our speakers today have talked about this. I was struck by the speakers who talked about the social machine, an approach that draws on the strengths of humans and machines and is a sort of iterative, collaborative process. So what then should we prioritize in a future infrastructure? This isn't just technologies and tools, it's a much wider idea of infrastructure. And for me, it's about whether we can, as a sector, get better at folding the outcomes of projects back into the institutions that care for collections, so that the infrastructure builds as we go, and we don't build it each time for each project. All right, that's fantastic. Thank you. And again, for those of you who weren't sure they saw the example they wanted on the screen here, our third and final question is here for you, which is really, is there anything else you want or want to say about a future investment in digital collections infrastructure? This will appear as a word cloud, so keep it short. And if you want to conspire with friends to get your thing up the biggest on the screen, I'm not here to judge. Rebecca's looking at me, though. She might judge. While you're typing in your answers and contributing your thoughts, your ideas, and your wishes, perhaps things also you think we should avoid and be more mindful of, I want to thank some of the people and organisations who got us here and are supporting us on this journey. So thank you again. It's been said before, but it's worth saying again. Thank you to the AHRC and UKRI for the support and funding for Tank, for advocating for this programme, for supporting it, funding it, and seeing the need and the potential in this area. It's really much appreciated. Appreciation also to the Tank Directorate team, who have worked incredibly hard to make this conference go smoothly and to run the programme really beautifully as well. Rebecca, Tertia, Sophie, Michelle and Javier, thank you. Thank you also to our chairs and speakers and to all of you, our delegates. Today is meant to be a conversation. It's not meant to be a kind of broadcast mode event. And we've really appreciated those who've travelled from across the UK and beyond to be here today. Speaking of where we are today, thank you to the British Museum for hosting us. The event management has been impeccable. The catering and technical teams have made it all go so smoothly. After this session, and I promise I will race through my last remarks to get you there, please remember the British Museum closes at 5 o'clock today. That means it's just about time to visit a favourite object again before you leave. And I used to work here. I love this place. I'm going to have trouble choosing. But plan the route if you've got one in mind, because you've not got long. While the word cloud populates on the screen behind me, I'm just going to look forward a little bit with you. It's been absolutely wonderful to be here with you today to think about how far we've come, where we are now, what remains to be done, and what the future might be. I think what we've heard in different ways, and I want to reinforce, is that digital research, teaching and learning, and engagement are not add-ons. They're now core to what we do. They need to be blended and integrated and part of our future and our thinking about our future. We as a sector need to be really ambitious about the potential for digital technologies to break down the barriers that exist, to open collections up to new research questions, and to enhance opportunities for public engagement. But we need to do that thoughtfully. We need to always be able to answer the question, if technology was the answer, what was the question? Who are we doing this for, and what do they want and need us to do? And we must, in doing this digital work together, not simply replicate the problems and the prejudices of the past. We need to think together and to think differently about how to make the collections we steward active and relevant for the widest possible audiences. So let's not just make today inspiring and thought-provoking, although it's been both those things. Let's use it as a springboard for something much deeper and much bigger, to genuinely transform our collections, both digital and physical. Thank you.